Hello everyone, welcome back to Whisper Tales channel. Before we get started, comment below where you are from and what time you are watching. And if you enjoy these stories, make sure to like and subscribe. Alright, let's get into it. Story 1. The Halvegaard Permafrost Discovery. In March of 2019, geologist Torsten Halvegaard led a research team to a remote site in the Brooks Range, approximately 140 miles north of the Arctic Circle. The team, consisting of 5 scientists from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, was studying accelerated permafrost degradation when they made a discovery that would end 3 careers and 2 lives. Halvegaard, a 53-year-old Norwegian-American with 30 years of Arctic experience, had noticed unusual thermal readings emanating from a section of permafrost that should have been permanently frozen. The readings suggested a heat source approximately 40 feet below the surface, maintaining a consistent temperature of exactly 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Human body temperature. In permafrost that had been frozen for over 40,000 years. The team began excavation on March 14th. By March 17th, they had reached a depth of 32 feet and discovered something impossible. Embedded in the ice was a structure, not a natural formation, not an artifact from any known civilization. A perfect rectangular chamber, approximately 15 feet long, 8 feet wide, and 7 feet tall, constructed from a material that their instruments could not identify. The material was neither stone, nor metal, nor organic. It absorbed all light directed at it, appearing as a void of absolute blackness against the blue-white ice. When team member Dr. Sunniva Grundtvig attempted to take a sample, her equipment passed through the surface as if it were liquid, though the material remained solid to direct touch. Halvegaard's audio recordings from that day capture the team's growing unease. At 14:23 hours, the recording captures a sound emerging from within the chamber. It has been described by audio analysts as resembling human breathing, but slowed to approximately 1 breath every 4 minutes. The breathing appeared to be in response to their presence. It grew louder as they approached. It stopped when they retreated. On March 18th, graduate student Callaway Finch Harrogate volunteered to enter the chamber through what appeared to be an opening on its eastern face. He was equipped with a headlamp, radio, and safety line. The team watched as he approached the opening, and then simply stepped inside. The radio captured exactly 11 seconds of audio before cutting to static. In those 11 seconds, Finch Harrogate can be heard saying, quote, "It's warm in here. There's light, but I can't see where it's coming from. The walls are moving. Not moving. Breathing. The whole structure is breathing. There's something in the center. It looks like... oh God, it looks like it's been waiting." The safety line went taut, then slack. When the team pulled it back, the final 40 feet had been cleanly severed. Not cut, not broken. The rope fibers appeared to have been unraveled at the molecular level and then precisely terminated. Callaway Finch Harrogate was never recovered. Halvegaard ordered an immediate evacuation, but the weather had turned. A storm system had materialized with impossible speed, dropping visibility to 0 and temperatures to -65. The team was forced to shelter in place. That night, the breathing from the chamber grew louder. It could be heard without equipment. It synchronized, according to Dr. Grundtvig's journal, with their own breathing. When they held their breath, it held its breath. When they exhaled, it exhaled, as if it was learning them. At approximately 2:15 in the morning, team member Dr. Ephraim Saltonstall left the shelter tent. His tracks in the snow led directly to the chamber opening. He had removed all his cold weather gear before entering. His body was never found. The remaining 3 team members were evacuated on March 20th when the storm finally broke. All 3 refused to discuss what had occurred during that final night. Dr. Grundtvig resigned from the university 6 weeks later and has not been publicly seen since. Dr. Marlis Kierstead was institutionalized in 2020 after a psychological break and remains under care. Torsten Halvegaard died by suicide in October of 2021, leaving a note containing only GPS coordinates. Those coordinates have been officially classified. The site has been declared a restricted geological hazard zone. No further research has been authorized, but satellite thermal imaging from 2023 shows the heat signature has expanded. The 98.6-degree zone now covers approximately 3 acres, and it's growing by roughly 6 inches per month. Whatever was waiting in that chamber is no longer waiting. It's waking up. Story 2. The Dunbrack Radio Phenomenon. KXAA-FM operated from a small station house in Tanana, Alaska, for 47 years before shutting down in 2017. During its final 3 months of operation, the station became the subject of an FCC investigation, 17 listener complaints, and 1 death that remains officially unsolved. Station manager Thessaly Dunbrack had run KXAA since 1992, broadcasting a mix of local news, weather reports, and music to the approximately 250 residents of Tanana and surrounding villages. The station operated on a standard FM frequency and had never experienced unusual interference in its nearly 5 decades of service. On September 3, 2017, at exactly 3:33 in the morning, the station began broadcasting content that no one had transmitted. The first report came from listener Anselm Drachenfels, a 71-year-old retired teacher who suffered from insomnia and often left his radio playing through the night. Drachenfels contacted the station the following morning to ask about what he called that interview program. He described hearing a calm, measured voice asking questions of an unknown respondent. The questions, according to Drachenfels, were deeply personal. They were questions about his own life, his failed first marriage, his estranged daughter, the accident in 1983 that he had told no one about. The respondent's voice, Drachenfels said, was his own voice, but younger. The voice of Anselm Drachenfels at 25 years old, answering questions about events that wouldn't happen for decades. Thessaly Dunbrack reviewed the broadcast logs and found nothing. The automated overnight programming had functioned normally. No interview had been scheduled or transmitted. But when Dunbrack listened to recordings of the 3:33 to 4:15 time slot, she heard only dead air. Not static, not silence. Dead air. The complete absence of broadcast signal. Over the following weeks, more reports came in, always at 3:33 in the morning, always highly personal content that no outside party should have known. Resident Ottomar Zweigelt heard a detailed account of his brother's drowning, told from the perspective of his brother, describing what it felt like to breathe water, to feel the cold enter his lungs, to watch the light shrink above him as he sank. His brother had drowned in 1978. There were no other witnesses. Resident Cordelia Blackstock-Wren heard her own voice reading from a diary she had burned 20 years prior. Entries about an affair, about a crime, about something she had buried in the woods behind her childhood home. Content that existed nowhere outside her own memory. The FCC investigation found no evidence of signal hijacking or unauthorized transmission. The station's equipment was functioning normally. There was no technical explanation for what listeners were hearing. On November 12th, Thessaly Dunbrack made the decision to stay at the station overnight and monitor the broadcast directly. She set up recording equipment, both digital and analog, and locked herself in the control room at midnight. At 3:33, the equipment registered a broadcast. Dunbrack was transmitting, though she had not touched the microphone. The recording captures her voice, calm and clear, reading what sounds like a prepared statement. But the content of that statement has been sealed by court order following a request from Dunbrack's surviving family. What is known is that the statement lasted exactly 42 minutes. During those 42 minutes, Dunbrack did not move from her chair. She did not touch any equipment. She stared, according to the security footage, directly into the corner of the room, a corner where nothing was visible. At 4:15, the broadcast ended. Dunbrack stood up, walked to the station's emergency exit, opened the door to the negative 37-degree night, and walked into the darkness without coat, boots, or any protective gear. Her body was recovered 4 days later, approximately 11 miles from the station. She had walked in a perfectly straight line, crossing 2 frozen rivers and climbing a 300-foot ridge without any deviation whatsoever. Her eyes were open. She was facing north. Her mouth was frozen in a shape that the coroner described as mid-speech. KXAA ceased broadcasting on November 15th. The equipment was removed. The building was demolished in 2019. But residents of Tanana report that at 3:33 in the morning, if you tune to that frequency, you can still hear something. Not words, not music, a presence, a waiting silence that sounds almost like breathing. And sometimes, rarely, it calls you by name. Story 3. The Glacier That Remembers. In July of 2021, cruise ship photographer Ingemar Pfefferkorn captured an image that the shipping company has since attempted to erase from existence. The photograph, taken during a glacier viewing excursion in Tracy Arm Fjord, shows something embedded in the ice face that defies explanation. The image, which was leaked to marine research organizations before it could be suppressed, appears to show human figures frozen within the glacier. Not 1 or 2. Hundreds, perhaps thousands. Bodies arranged in a spiral pattern, extending from the visible ice face down into depths that the camera could not penetrate. The bodies are not preserved in the manner typically seen in ice burials or accidents. They are standing, arms extended, faces pressed against the interior surface of the ice as if trying to push through from the inside, as if trying to escape. Pfefferkorn submitted the image to his supervisor, who immediately forwarded it to the company's legal department. Within hours, Pfefferkorn was terminated and required to sign a non-disclosure agreement. His camera equipment was confiscated, but he had already uploaded the image to a cloud server, where it remained until researchers at the University of British Columbia requested it for analysis. Glaciologist Dr. Nicoletta Silagi examined the image using advanced enhancement software and determined that the bodies showed characteristics inconsistent with any known era of human presence in Alaska. The clothing, where visible, did not match any documented cultural group. The body proportions were subtly wrong. Arms that appeared too long, fingers that seemed to possess additional joints, faces with features that Dr. Silagi described as human-adjacent but not human. Most disturbing was the condition of the faces pressed against the ice. They showed expressions of extreme terror, yes, but also something else. Recognition. As if they could see through the glacier wall. As if they were looking directly at the photographer at the moment the image was captured. The cruise company, North Star Pacific Voyages, denied any knowledge of the photograph and claimed Pfefferkorn had fabricated the image. But records obtained through FOIA requests revealed that 3 separate glacier viewing excursions had been quietly canceled in the weeks following the incident, and the company had redirected all future tours away from that specific section of Tracy Arm. Local indigenous elders, when shown the photograph, refused to discuss it in detail. One elder, speaking anonymously, said only that the glacier was known to their people as a place where the eaten ones were kept. He would not elaborate on who or what had done the eating, or why the eaten would be preserved rather than consumed. In September of 2022, a research team attempted to access the glacier face where the photograph was taken. Their vessel was turned back by the Coast Guard, citing unstable ice conditions. No instability had been reported in any official assessment. Satellite imagery from that month shows the section of glacier in question has calved significantly. The ice face where the figures were visible has collapsed into the fjord. Whatever was frozen, there is now submerged in water that reaches depths of over 1,000 feet. But fishermen in the area have reported unusual catches in the months since. Nets that come up shredded, sonar readings that show moving shapes at impossible depths, and twice the recovery of objects that could not be explained. One fisherman, Percival Ashworth Kinnear, reported pulling a net that contained a single artifact, a piece of carved bone approximately the size of a human hand, depicting a figure being pulled downward into what appeared to be ice. The carving was detailed enough to show the expression on the figure's face: terror and recognition. The artifact was surrendered to authorities. Its current location is unknown. Story 4. The incident at milepost 247. The Dalton Highway stretches 414 miles from Fairbanks to Deadhorse, one of the most isolated roads in North America. It crosses the Arctic Circle, traverses the Brooks Range, and passes through territory where the nearest help can be 10 hours away in good weather. In bad weather, there is no help. Milepost 247 marks a seemingly unremarkable stretch of road, approximately 50 miles north of the Yukon River. There are no services there, no landmarks, no reason for anyone to stop. Yet between 2012 and 2023, 14 separate vehicles have been found abandoned at that exact location. The circumstances are always identical. The vehicle is found idling, doors open, engine running, headlights on. Personal belongings remain inside. Wallets, phones. In 3 cases, hot coffee still steaming in cup holders. But the occupants are gone. Search parties have found no tracks, no signs of struggle, no evidence of animal predation. The people simply vanish. Mid-trip, mid-thought, if the discovered vehicles are any indication. One truck was found with a half-eaten sandwich sitting on the dashboard, the bite marks still fresh. In 2019, trucker Viggo Stromgaard survived an encounter at milepost 247 and provided the only first-hand account of what occurs there. Stromgaard was hauling supplies to Prudhoe Bay on a February night when his truck's electrical system began failing at approximately 11:45 p.m. He was, at that moment, passing milepost 247. His headlights dimmed, his radio died. His engine continued running, but every electronic component powered down simultaneously. Then the cold came. Not the normal cold of an Arctic February night, though that was present. Something else. A localized cold that Stromgaard described as having weight. It pressed against the truck's windows. It seeped through the door seals. His breath frosted immediately, and he watched ice crystals form on his steering wheel in real time. Then he saw them. Figures standing on the road ahead. Dozens of them, standing perfectly still in the complete darkness beyond his failed headlights. He could see them only because they were darker than the darkness around them. Negative spaces in the shape of people. One of them moved. Not walked. Moved. It crossed the distance between the road's edge and his driver's side window in a single instant, without any visible locomotion. It was simply there. Stromgaard could not see features. There were no features to see, just the outline, just the suggestion of a face pressed against the glass, inches from his own. He described feeling observed, not just seen, studied, as if something was reading the contents of his mind through his eyes. The entity, or whatever it was, spoke, not audibly, inside his head. A voice that Stromgaard said felt borrowed, like it was using words it had taken from others. It asked him a question. "Are you the one who called?" Stromgaard did not answer. He could not move. He could not breathe. The cold had entered his lungs and frozen his capacity for response. The figure seemed to lose interest. It withdrew. The others, still standing on the road ahead, turned in unison and began walking north. They did not look back. They made no sound. They left no tracks in the snow. Stromgaard's electronics restored themselves the moment the figures passed beyond his sight. He drove the remaining 167 miles to Dead Horse without stopping. When he arrived, he discovered his hair had turned completely white. He was 41 years old. The 14 individuals who vanished at milepost 247 have never been found. No bodies, no remains, no explanation. The Alaska State Troopers have officially classified each disappearance as missing persons, circumstances unknown. But truckers who work the Dalton Highway know the truth. They warn each other. Don't stop at 247. Don't slow down. Don't look at the road shoulders after dark. And whatever you do, don't answer if something asks whether you called. Story 5. The Sitka Sound Recordings. Marine biologist Dr. Solveig Torbjørnsen spent 17 years studying whale communication in southeast Alaska before her disappearance in 2020. Her research, considered groundbreaking in the field of cetacean linguistics, took a disturbing turn in the final months of her life, when she began detecting sounds that, she claimed, did not originate from any known marine species. Dr. Torbjørnsen maintained an array of hydrophones in Sitka Sound, monitoring humpback whale songs and orcapod communications. Her equipment was sophisticated enough to detect and isolate sounds across a wide frequency range, from the subsonic rumblings of fin whales to the high-pitched clicks of dolphins. In January of 2020, her equipment began picking up something else. The sound occurred only at night, between approximately 2 and 4 in the morning. It originated from the deepest part of Sitka Sound, a trench that reaches depths of over 300 feet. It was not whale song. It was not ship propeller noise. It was not any biological or mechanical sound that Dr. Torbjørnsen or her colleagues could identify. She described it in her research notes as structured vocalizations. The sound had rhythm. It had repetition. It had, she was increasingly convinced, meaning. Over the following weeks, Dr. Torbjørnsen became obsessed with decoding the sound. She stopped responding to emails. She missed department meetings. Colleagues who visited her laboratory reported finding walls covered with spectrographic printouts, connected by strings, and annotated with symbols that did not correspond to any known notation system. She told one colleague that the sound was a language, that something was speaking from the deep water, that it was trying to communicate, and that she was beginning to understand. Her final research entry, dated March 14, 2020, reads as follows. The grammar is not sequential. It is spatial, three-dimensional. The sounds create structures in the water itself, geometric forms made of pressure waves. It's not speaking words. It's building something, a message that exists in physical space. I have recorded the complete sequence now. I understand what it says. It says that the surface is thin. It says that we are seen from below. It says that depth is an illusion. There is no bottom. There are only doors. And something has been knocking for a very long time. Dr. Torbjørnsen's boat was found adrift in Sitka Sound on March the 16th. Her laptop was on board, displaying a spectrographic analysis of a sound file. The file was exactly 7 hours long. It has never been released to the public. Colleagues who attempted to listen to the recording reported immediate and severe physiological effects: nausea, disorientation, the sensation of falling despite standing on solid ground. One researcher, who listened for approximately 90 seconds before tearing off his headphones, described hearing something pushing through the recording. He refused to elaborate on what he meant. The recording has since been classified and removed from university servers. Dr. Torbjörnsson's body was never found. But fishermen in Sitka Sound have reported that something has changed in those waters. Fish populations have declined dramatically. Whales no longer enter the area. The water in the trench, when sonar scans are attempted, returns readings that cannot be accurate. Depths of 800 feet, then 1,200, then 3,000, then depths that exceed the maximum range of the equipment, as if the bottom is no longer where it used to be, as if something opened one of those doors. Story 6. The Children of Adak. Adak Island, in the Aleutian chain, was home to a major naval installation during the Cold War. At its peak, the station housed over 6,000 military personnel and their families. Today, the population hovers around 100, the infrastructure crumbling, the military ghosts outnumbering the living. But the strangest legacy of Adak involves neither the military nor the current residents. It involves the children who were never there. Between 1953 and 1967, naval families stationed on Adak reported a consistent and disturbing phenomenon. Children would come home from school talking about their classmates, friends they had made, games they had played. But the children they described did not exist. They were not imaginary friends in the traditional sense. Multiple children described the same non-existent classmates. They knew their names, their favorite colors, what they wore, where they said they lived. But there were no school records for these children, no housing assignments for their families, no adults who corresponded to the parents these phantom children described. One particularly detailed case involved a girl named Winifred Colquhoun Baines, age 8, who attended the Adak Elementary School in 1961. Winifred told her parents about her best friend, a girl named Meridia, who lived in the other houses. When asked to clarify, Winifred explained that there were 2 sets of houses on the island, the ones you could see and the ones you could see when the fog came right. Meridia, according to Winifred, had lived on Adak for always. She said the island belonged to her family before the Navy came. Before anyone came. Meridia told Winifred that her family was patient. They had been waiting for a long time. They would wait longer if they had to. Winifred's parents dismissed this as childhood fantasy until Winifred began exhibiting unusual knowledge. She could describe parts of the island that were off-limits to civilians. She knew about underground bunkers that were classified. She drew pictures of her friend Meridia that disturbed the school counselor so severely that the drawings were confiscated and sent to naval intelligence. Those drawings have never been declassified. But a researcher who saw them before they were sealed described them as depicting a child that was not quite a child. The proportions were wrong. The eyes were wrong. The smile was wrong. In March of 1962, Winifred Colquhoun Baines walked into the fog during a school recess and did not come out. Search parties found nothing. The fog that day was unusually thick, even for Adak. Visibility dropped to 0. Searchers reported hearing voices in the fog. Children's voices, laughing, playing, but always just out of sight, always retreating as they approached. Winifred's body was never recovered. Her family was transferred off the island within the week. Official records state she drowned in an accidental fall from coastal cliffs. But the cliffs were a quarter mile from the school. The fog had been too thick for anyone to have walked that distance without being seen. Similar incidents occurred throughout the 50s and 60s. Children disappearing into fog. Children talking about friends who didn't exist. Children who said the island was already occupied. The naval station was officially closed in 1997. The remaining civilian population is small and aging. They do not discuss the children. They do not venture out when the fog comes in, and the fog on Adak comes in often. Dense, impenetrable, carrying sounds that might be wind, or might be laughter. Story 7. The Iditarod Incident of 2018. The Iditarod Trail Sled Dog Race is one of the most grueling competitions on Earth, stretching approximately 1,000 miles from Anchorage to Nome across some of the most unforgiving terrain on the continent. Mushers face temperatures of -50, whiteout blizzards, and the ever-present danger of the wilderness itself. In 2018, veteran musher Dagny Thornfeld experienced something on the trail that would end her career and leave her with questions she has never been able to answer. Thornfeld was running strong in the middle of the pack when she departed the checkpoint at Kaltag, beginning the 90-mile stretch to Unexplained. This section crosses the Nulato Hills, a remote and wind-swept range where mushers are often completely alone for hours at a time. Approximately 40 miles into the stretch, Thornfeld's dogs began acting strangely. All 14 animals stopped simultaneously, something that experienced sled dogs simply do not do. They stood rigid, ears forward, staring at something ahead on the trail that Thornfeld could not see. She called commands. The dogs did not respond. She attempted to physically move the lead dog. It would not budge. It was, she said, like trying to move a statue. Then the dogs began to whine. A low, keening sound she had never heard from any of them. A sound of pure fear. Thornfeld looked up the trail and saw another sled team approaching. This was not unusual. Mushers pass each other regularly. But as the team grew closer, Thornfeld realized something was wrong. The team was moving in complete silence. No sound of runners on snow, no panting of dogs, no commands from the musher. It glided toward her as if traveling on air rather than frozen ground. The dogs, she could see now, were not quite right. Their movement was synchronized to a degree that seemed mechanical. Every leg lifted and fell at the same moment. Every head turned at the same angle. They were not running. They were performing the motion of running. The musher was wrapped in gear that obscured their features. But as the team passed within 10 feet of Thornfeld's position, the musher turned to look at her. She saw inside the hood. Thornfeld has never publicly described what she saw. She has said only that there was a face and that it knew me. In interviews, she has broken down when pressed for details. She has said that the face was familiar, that it was someone she recognized, someone who had died. The Phantom team passed and continued down the trail toward Kaltag, the checkpoint Thornfeld had departed from. She watched it disappear into the distance. When she finally got her dogs moving again, Thornfeld reached Unalakleet and immediately reported the encounter. Race officials noted her obvious distress, but confirmed that no other team had passed her on that section. Trackers showed no other mushers in the area during her reported time of encounter. Thornfeld scratched from the race and flew home to Fairbanks that day. In the weeks that followed, she researched the history of the Iditarod Trail and discovered something disturbing. In 1925, during the serum run to Nome that the Iditarod commemorates, a musher named Casimir Wrzesniewski had departed Kaltag with a dog team and never arrived at Unalakleet. He and his dogs vanished somewhere in the Nulato Hills. No trace was ever found. The description Thornfeld found of Wrzesniewski's sled and gear matched exactly what she had seen on the trail. She has not returned to competitive mushing. She no longer keeps sled dogs. When asked why, she says only that she made eye contact with something that day. Something that looked like a dead man but wasn't. Something that was still running its route almost a century later. And she's afraid that by seeing it, she may have joined its race. Story 8, The Prudhoe Bay Dreams. The North Slope oil fields represent one of the largest petroleum reserves in North America, supporting thousands of workers who rotate through in 2-week shifts, living in company housing in some of the most extreme conditions on Earth. The isolation, the darkness of polar winter, and the unending nature of the work have always taken psychological tolls. But in 2015, something happened at Prudhoe Bay that went beyond ordinary stress. It began with a worker named Lachlan Thistlewood, a 43-year-old roughneck from Tulsa who had worked the oil fields for 12 years. In January of 2015, Thistlewood began reporting unusual dreams to the company psychologist. The dreams were vivid, they were consistent, and they were shared. Thistlewood dreamed of a place beneath the permafrost, a vast open space larger than any natural cavern could be at that depth. The space was not empty, it was occupied. He could not describe what occupied it. The dreams provided impressions rather than images, a sense of enormous mass, of patient waiting, of awareness that extended outward like roots through the frozen ground. Something that had been there since before the ice, before the land, before the concept of land had meaning. The psychologist noted Thistlewood's account, but attributed it to standard isolation-induced stress. Then a second worker reported the same dream, then a third, then a 12th. Within 2 weeks, over 40 workers at the Prudhoe Bay facility were experiencing identical dreams. The details matched precisely: the underground space, the sense of massive presence, the feeling of being observed by something that had no eyes. But the dreams were evolving. Workers began reporting that the thing in the dreams was aware of them specifically. It knew their names, it knew their histories. It asked them questions, not in words, but in sensations. It wanted to know about the surface, about the drilling, about how deep the pipes went. Thistlewood's final dream, reported on February 3rd, was different from the others. In this dream, he was shown what the presence actually was. He saw it clearly for the first time. He refused to describe what he saw. He resigned his position that same day and left Alaska on the next available flight. He has not returned. He has not spoken publicly about his experience. Colleagues who remained in contact with him reported that he suffered from persistent insomnia, that he refused to sleep in darkness, and that he had developed an intense fear of any subsurface environment. The dream epidemic ended as suddenly as it began, approximately 2 weeks after it started. No further shared dreams were reported. The company attributed the phenomenon to a contaminated water supply and quietly replaced the purification systems at the facility. But drilling records from that period show something unusual. On February 4th, the day after Thistlewood's final dream, seismic sensors at the facility detected a massive subsurface event. Not an earthquake, not a drilling-related collapse. A single pulse of movement, originating from approximately 3 miles below the permafrost, spreading outward in all directions, as if something had stirred. The drilling operation at that site was suspended for geological assessment. It has never resumed. And workers at Prudhoe Bay, to this day, sometimes wake from dreamless sleep with a sense that something is listening, waiting, learning the schedule of the drills, calculating exactly how deep they're willing to go. Story 9. The Voice in the Aurora. The northern lights over Alaska are among the most spectacular natural displays on Earth, drawing tourists from around the world to witness curtains of green and pink and violet dancing across the winter sky. The indigenous peoples of Alaska have always known the lights are more than a visual phenomenon. They have always known the lights can hear you. In February of 2022, a group of 8 tourists from various countries traveled to Fairbanks specifically to view the aurora borealis. They hired guide Odessa Marchbanks, a 51-year-old lifelong Alaskan with decades of experience leading aurora tours. What should have been a routine excursion became something else entirely. The group traveled to a viewing site approximately 60 miles outside Fairbanks, far from light pollution, where the aurora was particularly active that night. Temperatures hovered around -30. Conditions were perfect. For the first 2 hours, nothing unusual occurred. The tourists photographed the lights, marveled at their movement, and listened to Marchbanks explain the science behind the phenomenon. Then, at approximately 11:45 p.m., the aurora changed. Marchbanks had witnessed thousands of aurora displays. She had never seen what happened next. The lights, which had been moving in the typical undulating patterns, suddenly stopped. They held completely still across the entire visible sky. Every ribbon, every curtain, every trace of luminescence froze in place as if someone had paused a cosmic video. Then the lights began to pulse. Not the gradual brightening and dimming of normal aurora activity, a rhythmic pulse, a pattern. One of the tourists, a linguistics professor named Erkki Hautamäki from Finland, was the first to recognize it. He said quietly but clearly, "That's Morse code." The group watched in silence as the aurora transmitted a message across the entire sky. Hautamäki translated in real time. "We have been signaling for centuries. No one answers. You are the first to look up when we call. Do not look away. We need you to remember. Remember the message. When you wake, write it down. Write down what we tell you. The message is not for you. The message is for what comes after. Something is traveling toward Earth. It will arrive when the lights go silent. When the lights go silent, remember what we told you. Remember and hide." The message repeated 3 times. Then the aurora resumed its normal movement, as if nothing had happened. The 8 tourists and their guide returned to Fairbanks in silence. By morning, none of them could remember the final part of the message. They remembered the warning about something traveling toward Earth. They remembered the instruction to hide. But the specific details of what was coming, or what they were supposed to remember, had vanished from their minds entirely. All 8 tourists reported the same experience. They had a sense of something important sitting just beyond the edge of memory, a crucial piece of information that they had possessed for a few hours, and then lost. Odessa Marchbanks stopped giving aurora tours after that night. When asked why, she said only that she could no longer look at the lights without feeling observed, without feeling like something was still trying to tell her something urgent, something that she was no longer capable of receiving. In March of 2024, astronomers detected an unusual object at the edge of the solar system. Not an asteroid, not a comet. Something that defied classification. Its trajectory, if unchanged, would bring it to Earth's vicinity in approximately 300 years. The lights over Alaska, some observers have noted, have become less frequent since the detection, as if they've said what they needed to say, as if they're going quiet. Story 10. The last transmission from Ugashik Lake. Ugashik Lake, on the Alaska Peninsula, is one of the most remote bodies of water in North America. Accessible only by float plane, surrounded by hundreds of miles of wilderness, it draws researchers, fishermen, and those seeking complete isolation from the modern world. In August of 2016, the Ugashik Research Station transmitted its final communication. The station had operated since 1987, monitoring salmon populations and conducting freshwater ecology research. It was staffed by rotating teams of 3 to 5 scientists who lived in isolation for months at a time. Communication was limited to twice-weekly radio check-ins and emergency satellite transmissions. On August 14th, the station's regular radio check-in did not occur. The Alaska Division of Fish and Game, which oversaw the station, assumed technical difficulties and scheduled a supply flight for August 16th. The pilot who arrived at the station reported that something was wrong immediately. The station appeared intact. Boats were tied at the dock. Equipment was properly stored. But there was no movement, no response to radio calls, no sign of the 4 researchers who should have been present. The pilot landed and approached the main building on foot. The door was unlocked. Inside, the station appeared to have been abandoned mid-activity. A half-completed meal sat on the table. A laptop displayed an unfinished report. Personal belongings remained in the sleeping quarters, but the researchers were gone. The pilot found a single anomaly. The station's radio equipment was still active. It was transmitting. Not on the regular frequency, but on a frequency that should not have been possible with that equipment. The pilot, a man named Proserpina Ashcroft Wynne, who had 40 years of experience in Alaska bush aviation, said he had never seen radio equipment behave that way. He copied down the transmission before calling for assistance. The transmission consisted of a repeating message, spoken in a voice that audio analysis later confirmed belonged to station director Stellan Nordquist. But the content of the message made no sense. It seemed to be a distress call. It seemed to be instructions. It seemed to be a warning. But the words themselves, when transcribed, formed no coherent sentence. The lake is not water. We understand now. It's a membrane. There's another side. They showed us. They took us through to show us. We're on the other side now. The other side looks like here, but it isn't. Don't look for us in the lake. We're still here. We're standing on the other side of the membrane. We can see the station. We can see through. If you come, don't go in the water. The water is how they reach. Don't let them touch you. They need living tissue to pull you through. We are not dead. We are somewhere else. Repeat message. Repeat. Repeat. The transmission repeated continuously until the equipment was shut down. Search teams found no trace of the 4 researchers. The lake was dragged. Divers found nothing unusual. Sonar scans showed normal topography. There was no evidence of foul play, no sign of animal attack, no indication of where the researchers had gone. But the divers reported feeling uncomfortable in the water. One described the sensation of being watched from below. Another said the water felt wrong, like it was too thick, like it was resisting. The Ugashik Research Station was closed permanently following the incident. The buildings still stand, unused and deteriorating. The lake still teems with salmon. Fishermen still visit, though many refuse to camp on the shore, because some of them have reported seeing people on the opposite bank. People who shouldn't be there. People who match the descriptions of the vanished researchers. People who stand at the water's edge, looking across, making gestures that might be waving or might be warning.